What's going on, everybody? I'm back today with another video, and today we're discussing trades for James Harden. Now, as I mentioned in the most recent video, it's a little bit shorter, by the way, than my previous videos. I want to see how you guys respond. I usually do like 14 to 22-minute videos, and I haven't really enjoyed editing those, so I'm going to try to do shorter ones. So I do have a James Harden video that's live right now. That's talking about whether the relationship between him and Houston Rockets is salvageable. And before looking into this, I would suggest you watch that video, but we're going to get right into this so I don't waste too much time on the intro. I don't think that relationship is going to work. I don't think it's going to work ever. I think James Harden wants out. I think he wants to play for a competitive team this year. I don't think he wants to be in Houston right now. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead through some trade scenarios. So send him to a competitive team in the Eastern Conference, because apparently that's where he wants to be. He already listed the Brooklyn Nets as a team he'd be willing to be traded for earlier this offseason. He said Philadelphia would be an option a couple days ago, and just today, and by the way, today is December 10th for me, it came out that be willing to go to Miami or Milwaukee. And none of those situations seem that viable considering the cap space and pieces that would have to be moved to make that trade work. But you know what? It's fun, and it's going to get a lot of views. So we're going to go through this, and we're going to do this video, and we are going to see what it would take to move James Harden out of Houston to a competitive Eastern Conference team. All right, so we're going to start with the Brooklyn Nets. And I have two trades for the Brooklyn Nets I'm going to go through here. I don't see very many variations for Brooklyn. To me, it's pretty straightforward. The only way to get Harden to the Nets is to move Caris LeVert and say that he is the young piece or that young budding star that Houston would want in return. Now, obviously, I don't think LeVert falls in that category. I don't think he's the budding star similar to someone like a Ben Simmons or Bam Adebayo or a Brandon Ingram. He's not in that category. But the Brooklyn Nets don't have that kind of young player, so they're going to have to pass LeVert off as that young piece who's going to be a future franchise player. And like I said, I don't think this deal will ever work. I don't think most of these deals will work, but we have to play with what we have in mind right now. And let's just hypothetically say that it's going to go through. There's going to be a trade for James Harden. Why not think about this one? And here we have Spencer Dinwiddie, Caris LeVert, Dorian Prince, and 3 first-round picks going to Houston Rockets for James Harden. As you can see, it's a projected 21-win increase for the Brooklyn Nets and a 21-win loss for the Houston Rockets. And that's going to be a theme here. No matter basically how many pieces you send back to the Rockets, it's always going to be a negative net wins for that organization because you can't replace a guy like James Harden, who's at least top 7 player in the world, if not top 3. And in this particular trade, move just enough cap space to make it work. Caris LeVert is that young piece. You got some role players here. I'm scoring from Dinwiddie and 3 first-round picks. Personally, I think it could take even more than that. It might take 4 first-round picks plus those 3 players to get this trade to work. But this is what I have so far. This is what I can work out on my computer. And we're on trade 2. And again, Caris LeVert is a key piece here. And this time we've added a little extra, but we switched it around a little bit. So we get Caris LeVert here, Spencer Dinwiddie, and then DeAndre Jordan. So basically, you're trading Prince for DeAndre Jordan, and I can't even say his last name. We'll call him TLC, just so we can go with that and make it a little bit shorter. Adding a second-round pick being sent from Houston to Brooklyn. Honestly, in the NBA, second-round picks, they're really not worth that much because they so rarely turn into star players or turn into starting-level players. Sometimes they do. It happens. You get good second-round players, but it doesn't happen often enough to value a second-round pick being a key piece in a trade. So I think you just throw in that second-round pick as a little extra ammo to kind of salvage Brooklyn instead of losing all of their draft picks in this move. This wouldn't be the first time, as we know, in the past 20 years that Brooklyn has sent all their pieces away for a star player. But this scenario gives the Rockets the size they need and someone like DeAndre Jordan. It gives them point guard and Spencer Dinwiddie, somebody who might be able to play a point guard, shooting guard spot, similar to what James Harden was doing in terms of scoring. Caris LeVert, as I mentioned, he's your young piece to build around here. And TLC can come off the bench and get the 3 first-round picks. I do have some protections on them right now. I top 3, top 8. Obviously, if the Nets are losing with James Harden, it would say that this deal didn't really work out for them. I would think you would have to leave one of those unprotected. I left the 2021 unprotected, but I think you could also have situations where the Rockets are going to say, leave them all unprotected, otherwise we're not playing ball. And that could happen. I don't think it'd be very sporting them, but they could do that. And in which case, if you really want James Harden, you're going to have to abide by those rules. What about Philadelphia? Philadelphia is another team that a lot of people are saying you could send James Harden to. Well, there's a lot more trades, in my opinion, that could work out where he ends up in Philadelphia because the 76ers have a lot more pieces that with larger contracts they can move around. And this first instance does not seem, I'll say, progressive for the Houston whatsoever. You trade for Tobias Harris, Terrence Ferguson, and 3 first-round picks. This is a worst-case scenario. This is a case where James Harden's already said he's not going to play, or that he's going to move on from Houston, and they're going to get nothing from him when his contract ends. So this is the worst-case scenario where basically everyone knows James Harden wants out. No one's willing to pay a lot of money or a lot of pieces for him, and the Rockets just have to pick the best option, which might be Tobias Harris. And I said this is the worst-case scenario. I don't foresee this happening. But there's a situation where Tobias Harris is the most you can get for James Harden because Harden is making it harder to trade him because he made it known he wants out. And again, of course, the 3 first-round picks. Trade number 2 from Philadelphia. This one includes Ben Simmons. This is probably what the Houston Rockets have more in mind. They want a guy like Ben Simmons. There are 3 first-round picks there as well. You might want to even up that to 4. But I don't know. Ben Simmons, to me, alone probably be worth 3 first-round picks. Because I really like Ben Simmons. I love him defensively. I love his ability to facilitate on offense. I do think the three-point shooting is a big problem, maybe bigger than some people realize. But he'll still be a low-tier all-star and a future defensive player of the year candidate the way he is now. So Ben Simmons does not have to add the three-point shot to be a great player. But Houston might want to push that three-point shooting on him. This deal makes a lot of sense to me for both sides. Well, if we're talking about whether the sides would accept it, I think this is one of the more likely deals that could happen. However, I don't believe this is beneficial to Philadelphia that much. I could see Harden and Embiid getting past the first round of the playoffs, but I do think they would run into trouble eventually. And again, Ben Simmons is a great defender, both on the perimeter and in the post. James Harden primarily thrives in the post defensively, but doesn't offer you much on the perimeter. So there's a little bit of a drop-off there in the defensive caliber of this team if you were to give up all these pieces. And basically, you would be ensuring you can't add much more after this because you're taking out your first-round picks. You're be in win-now mode, and you have maybe 1 or 2 years, maybe 3 or 4 years where you can win a title. I don't think this would be long-term a great move for the 76ers. This is another deal where obviously this Rockets don't get much out of it compared to the last deal where basically they had more pieces and they had more picks. I don't know the trade value for Ben Simmons is, so I'm throwing this out there potentially because there is a case where Ben Simmons is viewed as being the equivalent of maybe 3 or 4 first-round picks, and you don't have to give that much up in terms of your later-round picks to get Harden. So there is a scenario where maybe something like this plays out, but I think it's more likely we see that trade 2 scenario where it's Ben Simmons plus 3 first-round picks. But there is a case where maybe if James Harden trade value dips somehow, or if the Rockets decide, we just got to take what we can get, you could have a situation where you get Ben Simmons and only a first-round pick and then some second rounds as compensation. The Joel Embiid trade, this would be very interesting because we talked about how Ben Simmons going to Houston would give them one of the most physically dominant players in the league and someone you could really build around, someone you could develop offensively. Joel Embiid is already developed almost fully offensively, although I think you could use a little more in terms of facilitation and ability to put the ball on the ground and dribble around guys. Maybe a little bit more in that area, maybe adjust the three-point shooting a little bit. But other than that, he's about as well-rounded and almost as polished of a player as you can get in the league, bar maybe some of his health issues. And this would fix the problems that the Rockets have with their height right now, their lack of height, their lack of size. You get Joel Embiid. This guy is clearly a franchise player, two-way player, defensive player of the year candidate, maybe MVP candidate. I don't have him in that category right now. I don't think he's going to be an MVP candidate, but he could rise to that occasion if a situation provides itself with an opportunity. And of course, the 76ers get James Harden. I don't like the James Harden Ben Simmons combination in Philadelphia so much as I like the Harden and Embiid combination, so I do not expect this trade to happen. But this is just one potential option. And then we have the mother load of whatever the hell this is. We have James Harden going to Philadelphia, and the 76ers sending Danny Green, Mike Scott, Seth Curry, Terrence Brooks, and Tony Bradley, 4 first-round picks and 3 second-round picks to Houston. Now, this would be the only situation I could see in which the 76ers do not have to trade away a superstar player or a star player, and that being Tobias Harris, Joel Embiid, or Ben Simmons to get James Harden. This is the only case it could happen in. And this, again, would be a very worst-case scenario situation for the Houston Rockets where James Harden's trade value is just tanked for whatever reason. Although you are getting 4 first-round picks here in this situation. I think you could even up it. Maybe you get 5 or 6 in real life. I don't know if you could even pull that off, but you would definitely get shooting here in the forms of Seth Curry and Danny Green. You would have a little height in Tony Bradley. Mike Scott gives you some shooting and some height as well. Terrence Brooks does a little bit of everything. This trade is not beneficial to Houston, but I could see it happening because they won't have the leverage over James Harden much longer. I have not seen any James Harden to Boston rumors, but I'm going to create some of my own James Harden to the Boston Celtics trade just to talk about this briefly. Here's my first one. I don't love it a lot for the Rockets because you're getting Kemba Walker, who is a good player, maybe a low-tier All-NBA player, but I don't view him as the guy who's going to carry a franchise to a championship. I think everyone can agree with that. And his value might be dipping a little bit now that guys like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are kind of taking over in Boston. So I could see the Celtics being willing to trade him. I just don't know why Houston would want him to be their franchise guy moving forward. So I don't think this deal would happen for a number of reasons, but you are looking at 4 first-round picks, 4 second-round picks attached there for the James Harden deal. And again, if Harden's value dips because he's just not happy in Houston, which I don't think it will happen because, by the way, I mean, Anthony Davis made quite clear he wanted out of New Orleans, and the Lakers still had to give up a king's ransom to get him. So I don't think this will be a situation where Harden's value would dip, but there's potential for it, certainly. Even injuries could bring that on. I don't know what you would want or what you could foresee in this situation, but there is a chance that Harden's value changes over the course of the next several months, and maybe this deal would happen. I don't foresee it, but certainly it could be out there. All right, this deal seems much more likely to me, where it's Jaylen Brown and Marcus Smart, along with 3 first-round picks and 3 second-round picks, going to Houston for James Harden and a second-round pick. Marcus Smart is an all-defensive caliber player. He's tremendous. His scoring has gone up as well. He can have those 25-point games as you really want him to, really need him to. Jaylen Brown, likewise, tremendous two-way player. Not as good on defense as Marcus Smart, but still a very good defensive player. And he has a low-tier all-star potential. Now, does this make up for losing a superstar like James Harden? Absolutely not. It does not. But you have to realize if you're the Houston Rockets, you might not get that value back for James Harden. It just might not happen. I don't think it will happen. Because teams are going to wait to see if that value would dip and if they can get him for a lower value. And I think that's certainly what's going to happen in this case long term. And maybe this is a step down. This is probably a step up from the Kemba Walker trade, but this is certainly a step down from trading for Joel Embiid or Ben Simmons. I think this is probably on par with the Karis LeVert trades we saw from Brooklyn earlier because you're going to get players who have all-star or all-defensive potential, but you're not going to get a guaranteed superstar in return for James Harden. Those deals only happen with the Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid moves. And let's face it, you're not going to get Jason Tatum. It won't happen. The Celtics would much rather have Jason Tatum than have James Harden. And in our final Celtics trade, they held on to Marcus Smart, but they still get rid of Jaylen Brown. Daniel Tice goes as well, so does Romeo Langford and Javonte Green to make the money match, basically. And then you have 4 first-round picks going as well. What separates this from the previous trade is obviously no Marcus Smart, but you add in another first-round pick here. Again, you're basically lobbing first-rounders at Houston at this point to hope that it works out. And you do have Jaylen Brown going there. He is a significant piece in my mind, but not nearly significant enough to justify a James Harden trade. I don't view Boston being able to get James Harden unless they were willing to give up Jason Tatum, and that's certainly not going to happen. So I don't view a trade to Boston as logical, but there are certainly these hypothetical ideas we could play around with for a little fun. And then I have some miscellaneous trades here where I have Harden going to the Bucks, the Pacers, the Heat, or even the Raptors. I have one trade for each of these teams to put together a package for Harden. And obviously, I don't think any of these are going to happen. But you know what? Like I said, it's fun to play around with these hypotheticals, and it gives me content, and I need content. So we're going to roll with this. And right away with this Harden to Bucks trade, we can see that it's going to cost Chris Middleton if they want to get James Harden. You can pair Harden with Giannis, but it will cost you your number 2 in Chris Middleton. Dante DiVincenzo is an attractive piece around the league right now. They were trying to move to get Bogdan Bogdanovic earlier this year. That did not work out. And of course, you have 2 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks. It would probably take 3 first-round picks to pull this deal off. And you're pairing Harden, an outside shooter, with Giannis, who really doesn't have much outside shooting at this point. I think that'd be an attractive pairing. I just do not believe the Rockets would go for something with this little value. They would want someone bigger than Chris Middleton, which probably invalidates most of my trades at this point concerning that. But there is potential here where the Bucks could surrender a lot of their bench along with Middleton, and they could get James Harden as long as they're willing to mortgage their basically next 10 years worth of draft picks to get someone like James Harden. It is possible. It's not going to happen, but it could. And that's the fun part about this. All right, let's talk about the reigning Eastern Conference champions, the Miami Heat. What would they have to give up to get James Harden? Well, it's got to be Andre Iguodala, Kelly Olynyk, Tyler Hero as that young piece that they're going to try to leverage as that future superstar. Now, granted, is Tyler Hero going to be a superstar? I really don't know. I mean, he's not a top 50 player in the league right now. Let's put it that way. He's not the same level as someone like Bam, but the Heat are not going to trade Bam. They won't do it. So you have to use Tyler Hero instead. And you can see 3 first-round picks for James Harden and a second. Is it plausible? Yes, but I don't think it will happen. There's a lot of pieces here that Houston would probably be attracted to. Andre Iguodala and Tyler Hero obviously carry the most weight. Kelly Olynyk, you know. But yeah, this really comes down to what do you view Tyler Hero as? If the Houston Rockets view Tyler Hero as a future All-NBA caliber player or a future perennial All-Star, then absolutely you make that move. And I like to point out they have made this move in the past. They made it with James Harden. That's how they got Harden in the first place. They viewed him as a future superstar. And so they moved and got him from OKC because OKC wasn't going to be able to pay him long term. So this would not be the first time they traded for a shooting guard. I just don't view Tyler Hero right now in that light. I love Tyler Hero, don't get me wrong. I'm a huge Heat fan, by the way, too. I just don't think that he would fill that same void. I don't think he's going to get to the point where he is a James Harden. Maybe he gets to be a Devin Booker. I don't know. But I don't think he's going to be a James Harden caliber player. So again, makes that trade kind of questionable if you are the Houston Rockets. All right, can the Indiana Pacers pull off a trade for him? Well, they have the picks. They certainly have the picks to be able to pull this off. You can see 4 first-rounders loaded up here in the trade machine. Along with Miles Turner, that gives you the size you want inside. It gives you an all-defensive caliber center. And Malcolm Brogdon, a guy who can play point, can play shooting guard. And if you really need to, play small forward. Good defender, good facilitator. Not the best shooter, but gives you something. I think this is a decent deal for the Houston Rockets, but they would want a superstar. Neither of these guys are superstars. They are mid-level players. To me, Malcolm Brogdon is, at best, a top 50 player in the league. Miles Turner, probably top 60, top 70. And they really are looking for someone who could be a top 25 right now and in the future be a top 10 guy. And that's probably not going to happen. And the final one, this is a trade that I don't think anyone's talking about, but they could potentially try to get Pascal Siakam from the Raptors. And the Raptors, of course, would do this to pair James Harden with Fred VanVleet and Kyle Lowry and see what will happen here. No, I don't think the Rockets would trade for someone like Kyle Lowry. I don't think that would happen. I don't think they would be willing to trade for Fred VanVleet, considering Fred VanVleet just signed an extension. The Raptors would want to hold on to him. But Pascal Siakam could be up there. I don't think they will trade him. I don't think this deal will happen. But Pascal Siakam offers you that current top 25, top 30 skill level and the ability to climb up to be maybe a top 15 player in the league. So he gives you that potential that you don't have in someone like a Tyler Hero or a Malcolm Brogdon right now. And, of course, the 4 first-round picks are really adding that value and potentially giving you a complete option here. Now, again, does this equal the value of James Harden? Well, the trade machine says no change or protected win. So this is probably the closest deal we've had all day that might work. Would it actually happen? Probably not. In reality, James Harden's probably worth more than Pascal Siakam and all these extra pieces. I think he'd be worth 2 Pascal Siakams, if I'm being honest. So you're not going to have this happen. You're probably not going to see James Harden move for something like this. It will only happen if Houston gets desperate and realizes that Harden is not going to want to play for them. Harden's not going to give it his all. Or if Harden just decides, I'm done. And now, granted, it doesn't really benefit him to sit out the same way it would in the NFL. You can't just decide to sit out from your team because your contract will pause instead of continuing on. So there's a lot of stuff to navigate here for James Harden and also the Houston Rockets. I think Harden has more leverage, though, because it's become quite clear he doesn't want to be there. And this is a guy, like I said, potentially a top 5 shooting guard of all time. He has leverage. He has teams who want him. He has teams he wants to play for. It's just a question of, can they offer Houston enough to get him? I don't think so. But you know what? Tell me if you think there's a better trade out there that I didn't bring up in this video. Tell me if there's a team that would fit with James Harden that I didn't discuss. And if I'm wrong, just tell me I'm wrong. Don't download the video, though. Please, a thumbs up or something would be appreciated here. My voice is going, and you can probably hear I've gotten a lot quieter as the video goes on. But my voice is going, so I'm going to go deal with that. And I will see you guys all in the next one.